Hello everyone. In today's video, we're going to be talking about challenging anxiety thoughts. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm super happy to have you here. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our weekly videos on mental health related topics and helpful coping skills for you to apply in your own everyday lives. My name is Gabriel Arroyo, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with Soaring Families Counseling located in Southern California. So today we're talking about how to challenge anxiety-provoking thoughts. We all have them. We all have those thoughts that the what ifs, the what if this, what if that creates that anxiety. So the first thing to know about anxiety is what is it, where does it come from, and then how do we work with it? Remember, in previous videos that I've done, I talk about anxiety being a normal reaction, a normal experience. It's our mind telling us that something important is happening, and that's based off of the value we put on it. So if we have thoughts that are creating anxiety, it's our mind telling us, hey, this is something important to us. And then depending on the value we place on it, we're gonna have more anxiety about it. So for example, for me, and I share this with a lot of my clients, and a lot of people know this about me, I used to get really anxious with speaking to women. It didn't matter, I would just get super anxious about it. So I would get anxious about talking to women when I was single. Of course I'm married now, so I don't have this anxiety anymore, but part of the challenge I had was I had a very big value on speaking to women when I was single, because I'll just say it. I was desperate to find love. So it was super important to me. I wanted to find my special someone, which I did. And I would get really anxious about talking to women when I was single. So because the value was so high, I had all these what if thoughts. Well, what if I never find the love of my life? What if I never get married? What if I end up being single for the rest of my life? All these what if thoughts came into my mind in split seconds whenever I would interact with any woman. It didn't matter if I was attracted to them or not. I would just become super anxious because my mind would just be flooded with these thoughts. So that's what anxiety is. It's our mind telling us that something important is happening, and then the anxiety levels, appropriate or not, is based off of the value we place on it. So for me, it was really important for me to find someone, right? And I had to challenge those thoughts, because what ultimately I ended up doing was the value I had on seeking my partner was way higher than I felt about myself. So all these what if thoughts created anxieties about myself, insecurities about myself, and that's ultimately how anxiety works. So we plug in whatever the factor is for you that creates the anxiety. So buying a big item, studying for a test, meeting somebody, meeting new people, creating friendships, creating relationships, whatever it is. So whatever that component is that creates that anxiety, we just plug it into this formula. Anxiety is our mind telling us that something important is happening, and it's based off of the value we put on it. Because if you think about it, as you're watching this video, you think about all the things that you get anxious about. Think about the things you don't get anxious about. You probably don't care about them, right? So if I was super anxious about talking to women, talking to other guys, wasn't super anxious about it, right? Or playing with puppies, not super anxious about it, right? Because I love dogs. So that's how anxiety works, is it's dependent on the importance and the value we place on it. So how do we challenge these anxiety thoughts? So once again, it goes back into mindfulness, being grounded, being in the present moment, practicing the mindfulness exercises we talk about in all the other videos we have. Check out the mindfulness playlist, but it's about being present moment. That's how we're gonna challenge the anxiety-based thoughts. So for me, for my example of being anxious of talking to women, it was based off of my history, my past of unhealthy relationships or unsuccessful relationships, and then me constantly associating to past relationships. So once again, it's that same formula. For me, it was my X factor that I was anxious about, of finding my wife. And then when I look at that X factor, it was me time traveling, essentially, looking at my past of all my failed relationships, all the negative experiences. And then my mind is not being present moment focused. It's associating to all the past things, because our mind's lazy in that sense of creating new data, and then me what-ifing all over the place. I was, well, what if I don't find it? What if I am unlovable? What if I am unattractive? What if I do end up single for the rest of my life? All these what ifs created a ridiculous amount of anxiety. So obviously I worked through that, and even before I met my wife, I worked through those what ifs. I challenged myself to be present moment focused. So by the time I did meet her, I was in the moment and I was just being myself with I still had anxiety about it, because remember, anxiety is a normal thing that our mind is telling us something important is happening, but it wasn't that unhealthy level of anxiety, because I would get really nervous. I wouldn't be able to speak. I would start stuttering a lot, and that's how the anxiety affected me. I would start feeling sick. So that's the unhealthy elements of anxiety. So once again, you plug in that same formula. What's our X factor, and how do we challenge those thoughts? Being mindful, being present moment. And I always tell people that when I'm working with them and we're challenging anxiety is, why are we only entertaining the negative what ifs, right? I gave you a list of my what ifs that I genuinely thought, well, why was I only thinking about being single for the rest of my life and being unattractive and never finding love? What about all the other what ifs, right? Because equal opportunity in that sense is, well, what if I do find the love of my life? How come I'm not anxious about that? What if I am super attractive and I'm gonna attract the one for me? Well, that's something to be anxious about too, right? We don't think about the positive what ifs. An example I usually give to people when I'm working about mindfulness and anxiety and challenging mindfulness or anxiety provoking thoughts is, if we were at work, right, and we got an email from our boss, it says, hey, let's meet up at noon, or can you meet at X time? What's automatically the first thought you think? And I would say 9 out of 10 people tell me, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get fired or I'm gonna get in trouble. And then I ask them, why is that the first thought? Like, I've had some pretty cool bosses in my career. So my initial thought would be like, oh yeah, my boss knows I'm a big Marvel and Disney fan and the new movie came out this past week. He probably wants to ask my opinion of it or get some feedback on it. Or, I did a really good job with this situation, this case. They probably want to talk about it. So once again, why are the what ifs negative? So that's where we have to challenge those what if thoughts, so that way we're not constantly driving that anxiety. So we got the mindfulness and challenging the what ifs. So typically I do this rule of thumb. If I have one negative thought, I double down and I think 2 positives about it. So if I'm using the work example, right? Boss emails you, says, hey, let's meet up at noon to talk about something. So if you think like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get in trouble, there's your one negative thought. I want you to challenge it with 2 positives. What could it possibly be that your boss would want to talk to you for about something else? So we're challenging with positive what ifs. The third concept is, what ifs just simply don't exist, right? Those are hypotheticals. They just absolutely don't exist. So for me, the way I challenge my own anxiety now, because I do have other anxiety triggers, is I don't entertain what ifs. I don't think about the positive what ifs. I don't think about the negative what ifs. I just think about what's in front of me, what's real, what's right now. So, for example, in my previous videos, recently my wife is pregnant, so that's an exciting thing. So there's a lot of what ifs that we could possibly think about with pregnancy and expanding our family. But instead of entertaining good or bad what ifs, I just think about what's right now, right? So my wife is pregnant. What can I do now? I got to take care of my wife. Got to prepare for the baby. That's it. What can I control now? So if we're studying for a test, we are preparing for some big plans, a vacation, a new job, whatever the case may be. So our mind's naturally going to do those what if things, especially if we're not used to practicing mindfulness. So instead of thinking about the what if, good or bad, let's think about the now. What can we do now? So if we're planning for our next school year, right? So if you're going into high school, middle school, or you're starting school, going into a new college, you're starting a new job, whatever the case may be, meeting that new person, going on a first date, instead of thinking about all those positives and negative what ifs don't exist. Just be in the moment and enjoy that moment. What are you doing now to prepare for that experience? And this is how we challenge anxiety-provoking thoughts. If you have any questions or any scenarios you'd like to discuss, be sure to comment. I'd love to hear about them, and I'll provide some feedback of some examples of how I would challenge these anxiety-provoking thoughts. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our weekly videos on mental health related topics and helpful coping skills for you to apply in your own everyday lives. Thank you.